Atomic Skull is a man teetering on the brink of death, his mind plagued by violent seizures that strike him with each passing moment. However, it's these same convulsions that grant him the extraordinary powers that make him a formidable foe to anyone who dares to stand in his way. But don't let his impressive abilities fool you. They are also the very thing that will eventually lead to his demise. Superman has encountered a wide array of formidable villains, but few have been as terrifying and unstable as the Atomic Skull. With two different characters taking on this villainous mantle, Albert Michaels and Joseph Martin, the Atomic Skull is a nuclear-powered menace that has plagued Superman time and time again. Both characters' origin are shrouded in tragedy, with each one possessing a unique backstory that makes them a formidable foe for the Man of Steel. In this video, we will delve into the origins of both Albert Michaels and Joseph Martin, exploring the events that led to their transformation into the Atomic Skull and the havoc they have wreaked on Superman's world. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. Origins of Atomic Skull. Albert Michaels. The first ever Atomic Skull was born as Albert Michaels, an extremely brilliant scientist whose unique brain was carrying an equally unique affliction. So, this exceptional but superbly unfriendly and morose guy became the chief administrator of Star Labs. You know, the not-so-evil organization that is known to provide medical assistance to DC superheroes. But Michaels was secretly working on the criminal organization called Skull, which was using him to get a hold of Star Labs technology. Michaels illegally provided technology from Star Labs to Skull to aid in their operations. Additionally, he falsely accused Superman of the damages that occurred at Star Labs during his battles with supervillains. But why was he doing this? What was Michael's motivation behind deceiving his own company, getting in the bad books of Superman, and joining hands with that era's most notorious criminal organization? Well, Michaels joined forces with Skull due to his severe seizure disorder, which posed a significant threat to his life. Although modern medicine was unable to offer a solution to his condition, Skull developed an experimental neuropathy involving a radium-powered brain implant that could regulate the frequency and intensity of his seizures. When Janet Clyburn, a researcher at Star Labs, gave Superman an unsanctioned tour of the facility, Michaels got scared of the things Superman could find, and naturally, he fired her from her position at Star Labs. Later, Skull provided Michaels with an alien matter transport array stolen from the Cobra cult. Under the guise of working on a secret project for Star Labs, Michaels collaborated with Skull in a scheme to attack Star Labs and acquire rare man-made elements for the production of artificial kryptonite. Michaels and Skull also turned one of their agents, Roger Corbin, into the cyborg known as Metallo and installed in him a kryptonite heart. However, Metallo later discovered Skull's true intentions and turned against them, launching a series of attacks on Skull members using fake kryptonite stones. Michaels went into hiding as a result of Metallo's actions, leading to his replacement by Janet Clyburn as chief administrator of Star Labs. Superman pursued Metallo and learned from him that Michaels was a Skull agent. Eventually, Superman confronted Metallo and Michaels at a Skull hideout with the help of Lois Lane. In an attempt to escape, Michaels took Lois hostage, but Superman managed to apprehend Metallo, but Michaels fled using the matter transport array. Michaels swore revenge against Superman, and Skull was more or less disbanded at that time, with Michaels promising Superman to rebuild it in issue 317 of Superman Volume 1. It is important to note that until this point, Michaels had not undergone the surgery that would fix his brain with the radium-powered implant. But by the time issue 323 of Superman Volume 1 started, the Skull scientists had done their work on him, and it was in issue 323 that Michaels would take the daring step of going against the Man of Steel himself. The issue began with Michaels, a man whose own brain was quite literally killing him. He swore to kill Superman. He imprisoned the only scientists who could have cured Michaels. But Albert Michaels was not himself anymore after undergoing surgery. He had started calling himself the Atomic Skull, a villain whose very voice was the anguished wail of a soul in torment, the scream of a man who was stepping closer to death by each seizure and convulsion that created a miniature brain explosion. Meanwhile, Superman learned about something called the kryptonite pipeline after learning that pieces of kryptonite had started to appear on Earth. He went into the far reaches of space and learned that Krypton 2, the planet he created in Superman issue 255, had exploded because of an unstable core, just like the original planet of this caped superhero. And without wasting any time there, he returned back to the WGBS news headquarters to assume his role as Clark Kent. We learned that WGBS correspondent Oscar Asherman was at Star Labs to interview Janet Clyburn. The live interview began, and it was not before long that Star Labs got covered in an ominous skull-shaped shadow of a skull airship. Clark Kent took note of the development and knew that he had to be there as soon as possible to stop the evil organization. As an escape, he quickly put on some makeup to look pale and sickly. How quick, you ask? Well, he himself described it as invisible superspeed. Ah, the sheer beauty of these classic comics. Nevertheless, after being excused by his boss, Clark assumed his Superman identity and rushed to Star Labs. The energy bolts from the ship were shearing away the walls of the building, and it soon became clear to Superman that Skull was after Dr. Clyburn. Superman went after her, but was left toast when a bolt of lightning had him capering in midair like a marionette gone mad. It was as if every electrical impulse in his brain had short-circuited, and every muscle of his body was twitching, leaving his body jerking spasmodically. But what could possibly do this to Superman? The strange seizure ended in a few seconds, but the Skull ship had abducted Clyburn, where Skull members were introducing her to the ship's auxiliary power source, which was a man lying on the table. It turned out that that man was Albert Michaels, aka Atomic Skull, and he was then leading Skull. So the radium implant did help Michaels for a brief period before it stopped working. In fact, it exacerbated Michaels' situation by giving him the ability to project bioelectricity through his messed up epileptic brain. So basically, his brain now functioned as a miniature power generator, creating tremendous energy that even powered the Skull ship hyperdrive engines. Then, Atomic Skull managed to lure Superman to his hideout, where he cunningly coerced the Man of Steel into performing certain tasks to load a warhead with kryptonite samples. These samples had been obtained by the Atomic Skull through a mission dubbed the Kryptonite Pipeline, which involved retrieving newly fallen kryptonite rocks from outer space. The warhead was set to detonate in the ionosphere, generating a ring of kryptonite radiation around the Earth, similar to the Van Allen radiation belt. This would, in turn, deprive Superman of his extraordinary abilities. Additionally, the Atomic Skull schemed to capture and control Titano, the super ape, and implanted a device in the animal's brain to intercept his telepathic signals. This allowed the Atomic Skull to manipulate Titano into attacking Superman. In the following issue, that is, issue 324, Superman lay unconscious as the super ape named Titano further weakened Superman through his kryptonite vision. It started to seem that looks were quite literally going to kill the Man of Tomorrow. Atomic Skull was under the impression that Superman was unconscious and that Titano's presence meant a disastrous end for Superman. Well, these were two of Atomic Skull's gravest mistakes. But Superman was not unconscious. He tried to fight Titano, who used to be playfully mischievous. But because of his mutation, he was extremely huge and hence harmful to those around him. So to protect Titano and those around him, he sent the mutated chimp to another planet. His presence on Earth was curious, but more curious still was his newfound feral and ferocious nature. Superman wouldn't hurt a fly if he didn't have to, so hurting Titano was very difficult for him. However, he blindfolded the humongous ape with a giant lead pipe, which stopped the kryptonite vision. After this, he went for Atomic Skull, who was in the process of summoning his men. However, Superman stopped that from happening. But what about the missile that was about to blanket the Earth with small kryptonite particles that had the potential of stealing Man of Steel's powers? Well, Atomic Skull was about to hit Superman with another one of his bioelectric beams, but this time around, Superman used his super cape to deflect the beam right back at Atomic Skull. Superman then rushed to a nearby lead mine and picked up some galena from the deposits and coated it on another missile, which he ensured would detonate simultaneously with Atomic Skull's kryptonite missile, and the plan worked like a charm. Now, Superman had to take care of Titano, whose brain had an implant similar to Atomic Skull's. Superman figured this out using his X-ray vision, but was failing to take care of the majestic beast. And it was only with Lois Lane's help that Titano was brought under control. Finally, Titano was pacified and the menace of Atomic Skull was stopped for then. Number 2. Joseph Martin's transformation into Atomic Skull. Experiment gone wrong. Superman had successfully captured Parasite, a terrible DC villain who absorbed the life force of others to sustain himself because his own body was in a state of constant decay and needed newer life force to thrive. He was brought to the Metropolis branch of Star Labs, where Star Labs scientists Dr. Leung and Dr. Hamilton had kept Parasite in an inhibitor cylinder with dozens of fail-safe measures. As Superman left the containment room along with Dr. Hamilton, a young boy named Joseph Martin saw Superman in the flesh just meters away from him. Martin had always been a die-hard fan of Superman, having grown up watching the old serial superheroes like Captain Thunder, Commando Cody, etc. But Superman was the real thing. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Superman up close. I mean, I can relate. If I found Henry Cavill at my doctor's place, I would go through a deep fanboy moment as well. So yeah, Martin was there to meet his doctor, but what was his affliction? Well, Martin was suffering from periodic fatigue, and no doctor was able to help him. As a last resort, he found himself in the corridors of Star Labs, a place where supervillains often found their origins and superheroes found their cures. Nevertheless, Superman went back to his office, only to find that the staff of the Daily Planet had gone on strike owing to cost cuts and layoffs. The boss, Perry White, had been on vacation, and the board created an elegant mess in his absence. From White's thoughts, it became clear that Metropolis had recently been plagued with a lot of issues like recessions, earthquakes, fires, and now a strike. It was hard for him to imagine something worse, but he was oblivious to the menace the comic book writers had in mind. Back in Star Labs, Joseph's doctor had managed to diagnose the boy and learned that Joseph had a repressed metagene, a rare genetic quirk that lies dormant until triggered by extremely stressful physiological distress, radical chemical imbalance, radiation, that sort of thing. But before Joseph Martin could process this life-changing news, Star Labs experienced an earthquake, or at least it felt like an earthquake. Star Labs and all of Metropolis was under attack from Monarch, once a mighty hero, but now an evil villain who sought world dominance above everything else. And his powerful machines were hard at work to achieve a simple goal: to level the great city of Metropolis. As the machines continued to wreak havoc, Martin found himself in the same room as Parasite, who asked Martin to help him escape so he could get them both to safety. But one of Monarch's machines had penetrated through the walls of Paradise's prison. In a bid to free Parasite, Martin reached the override switch on the main console, but as the massive grounding cables of Monarch's machines made contact with the console, energies beyond a human's capacity to sustain passed through Martin. While he struggled inside Star Labs, the defenders of Earth had managed to defeat Monarch and his machines. As the heroes rescued those stuck in the debris, Joseph Martin came out of there, almost unhurt, at least on the exterior. On the inside, a storm was raging inside this boy who could not remember anything from Star Labs. He was exhausted by the events and fell asleep. Joseph woke up feeling unwell, but he got a real shocker when he learned that he had become bald as well. He decided to seek help from Star Labs, unaware that the building had recently collapsed. But before he could even take a step, he unintentionally unleashed his newfound powers, almost ending the lives of a group of muggers who crossed his path. Driven by his newfound abilities, Joseph headed to the Tivoli Theater because a film serial festival was to begin there that evening, but his fate was about to take a drastic turn. Superman learned of this dangerous individual and took it upon himself to confront Joseph. However, he quickly realized that this was not an ordinary encounter, as Joseph's face transformed into a pale skull engulfed in a pulsing aura. In fact, Joseph hurled Superman with his new powers. The once innocent man now recited the very lines of Atomic Skull, a notorious character from the serials, and became a force to be reckoned with. Superman himself struggled to contain him, and the fate of Metropolis hung in the balance as the Atomic Skull's power became more apparent. Major story arcs of Atomic Skull. Number 3. Joseph Martin thought he truly was a fictional character in Superman number 732. In this issue, strange things happened to both Atomic Skull as well as Superman. In fact, the Man of Tomorrow seemed to lose his original powers and gained a completely new set of energy-based powers. Superman suddenly found himself close to the poles, while merely seconds ago he was fighting Atomic Skull in Metropolis. An energy surge quite literally blew him apart, and he felt dispersed. More importantly, his entire body now seemed to be composed entirely of some form of energy. But Superman had no time to waste on himself, because Atomic Skull was still wreaking havoc on Metropolis. Here, Atomic Skull had gone totally nuts, as seen in issue 670. He had already started believing that he was a character from an old movie serial. By issue 732, he came to believe that Lois Lane was his long-lost girlfriend named Zelda, and Superman was his enemy Dr. Electron, who was supposed to be the bad guy. And as for the law enforcement guys, Atomic Skull assumed them to be the henchmen of Dr. Electron, their fallen master. Taking note of Atomic Skull's skirmish with Superman, a lot of cops gathered on Ground Zero. Clearly, they were ill-equipped to take on this guy, and there would have been a lot of bloodshed. So Lois Lane decided to play along with Atomic Skull's story and, addressing him as Darling, asked him to take her away from there as she was frightened. Ever in Zelda's love, Atomic Skull took her to his hideout, the same old Tivoli theater where it had all begun. It wasn't before long that Superman arrived on the scene and learned that his beloved was in the custody of a vicious madman. But he was losing his powers, he was looking extremely pale and tired. Furthermore, he was failing to use his X-ray vision effectively. I mean, this guy couldn't even fly now. So, he did what any man would do and asked for help. He hopped into a car with an officer driving him around to find Lois. But how was he gonna find her without his X-ray vision? Well, he now had a new vision that seemed to be based on energy. It allowed him to differentiate between different energy signatures, like radiation left by the Atomic Skull. All he needed to do was follow the trail to its source. However, a truck passing through the radiation streak caused it to break, and Superman lost sight of it. Not so super now, eh? Back at Tivoli Theater, Atomic Skull was saying some weird stuff about saving the innocents from Dr. Electron, aka Superman, etc. And Zelda, I mean Lois, realized that Atomic Skull wasn't an inherently bad guy, just crazy. On the other hand, Superman was now able to change his body's composition from matter to energy and other weird stuff. For instance, his hand could literally go through a computer and absorb all the data it had, which conveniently provided him with a eureka moment. He reached the theater in no time, and another fight ensued between Atomic Skull and Superman. In the end, Star Labs contacted Lois Lane, and they gave her a device called the Negator Rod, which could leave him helpless. She was the only one who could get close enough to attach the Negator Rod, and she did not fail. Later, Atomic Skull was taken into custody. Number 4. What happened when the villainous Atomic Skull learned that there was a movie taking liberties with his life, and it was being filmed on the streets of Metropolis? Will on-set sabotage be just the beginning? Could Superman get the explosive situation under control before all Metropolis paid the price? Well, issue 571 of Adventures of Superman showed Atomic Skull, aka Joe Martin, in a completely new light. Given that Martin had gone berserk after assuming the identity of Atomic Skull, he should have been in prison for the criminally insane. But a new class of psychotropic drugs cured him, and he was freed. In fact, he even penned down an autobiography which was then being turned into a full-fledged motion picture. And the irony of it all was Martin being hired as a consultant for his biopic. The comic started at the movie shoot, in which Martin was participating in an experiment to activate his dormant metagene. But Martin objected to this since he was never really subjected to any kind of an experiment, and whatever happened to him was purely accidental. The producer of the film, Mr. King, wanted Clark Kent to do a series of promotional articles for the Atomic Skull movie. And although it wasn't something Clark would usually take up, he agreed because it would help him keep a close eye on Martin. Clearly, he was worried that something might go wrong because the ex-Atomic Man was involved. Oh boy, he was so gonna be proven correct. Another scene of the movie depicted Martin being cold and rude to the female protagonist, Lulu, who was supposed to be based on Lois Lane. But Martin objected again, saying that he loved Zelda and would never speak coldly to her. This time around, Martin almost turned into Atomic Skull, but you see, he couldn't even if he wanted to because according to his parole conditions, he would be brought back to jail if he ever transformed into Atomic Skull. But the misrepresentation of his life was troubling him, almost to the point of giving up. He did not want to be remembered as the bad guy because whatever he did was based on the false belief that he was, in fact, a good guy. However, things had started to go awry at the set. For starters, a spotlight almost fell on the guy playing Superman, but Clark Kent saved him. At a later point, the set saw a crane malfunction, and once again the Superman actor was at the risk of dying. But the worst of it came to life when the film's climax was being filmed. Atomic Skull was to have his final battle with Superman, with cops hunting Atomic Skull. However, the fake police chopper started using live ammunition. The chopper was firing aimlessly and risked the lives of everyone present at the shoot and even the innocent bystanders. With Superman nowhere in sight, Martin was faced with a dilemma. If he became the Skull, he could help all of those people, which would mean breaking parole. He might as well just check himself back into jail. But if he didn't become the Skull, the madness would continue and people could die. Clearly, he made his insane choice and preferred his own brand of madness to prevail. By then, Superman had arrived at the scene, and he had learned from Skull that the chopper was being remotely piloted. So while Superman was tasked with finding the people responsible, Skull lured the chopper away from the crowd. In the end, it was revealed that the producer was trying to halt the movie's production and claimed the insurance because he had embezzled money from the man who was funding the movie, and that man was none other than Lex Luthor, someone who didn't take being cheated too kindly. So the producer wanted to replace the stolen money with the insurance money. However, he was caught, and as for Atomic Skull, he now knew exactly who he was, and although he was taken to prison, Lois Lane promised that she would do everything in her command to bring him out at the earliest. Number 5. Atomic Skull and Batman Superman. There are two interesting things to note about this story arc about the man with the atomic brain. First, he was once again named Albert Michaels, and second, the story was set in Gotham instead of Metropolis. So the 9th issue of the comic started in Gotham Harbor, where a couple of cops found a dead body with all kinds of wires and other such appendages. Clearly, something sinister was cooking in Gotham. The very next panels took us through a high-speed sequence as we followed the Batmobile leading up to our man of the hour, Albert Michaels, the Atomic Skull. Batman had asked Bullock to order that every cop move out of the Skull's vicinity. Nonetheless, when Batman reached the Skull, 5 of them were targeting Skull. But from the very first instant, Skull did not wish to fight Batman. In fact, he had come to Gotham from Metropolis to reveal a certain secret to Batman that someone was going to use him to get to Superman. Skull initially attacked the cops, but Batman stopped him. However, Batman soon smelled something fishy about the cops. Well, they were dead men who were being used as drones by someone, this someone being the same guy who was after Batman and Superman. But before Skull could answer who this supposed master villain was, Skull exploded and seemingly died. On the other hand, Superman was still in Metropolis on a date with his wife, Lois, when he heard an explosion in Gotham. Superman wouldn't necessarily keep an ear out for Gotham since it was under Batman's wings, but sometimes things got out of hand. As Superman arrived in Gotham, he first rescued the civilians before rescuing his cowled friend from the debris. Batman brought him up to speed. The two of them were confused about who this person was, from whom even Atomic Skull was running. But unlike them, I read the comics and came to know that it was the Ultrahumanite, one of the greatest criminal geniuses ever in the body of an albino gorilla. It turned out that Ultrahumanite was planning something very elaborate, and Atomic Skull was working with him, until he wasn't. While Batman and Superman found one Atomic Skull explosion too much of a tragedy, Ultrahumanite was preparing an atomic army. The rest of the story was about Superman and Batman trying to defeat Ultrahumanite, who had taken control of Batman's body. However, at the end of the 11th issue, Atomic Skull came back to life from his very grave. Number 6. Atomic Skull in Justice League Unlimited. In a world of superpowered beings, Atomic Skull made a name for himself as a fierce contender in the underground fighting arena known as Roulette's Meta Brawl. His opponent, the legendary Wildcat, a seasoned fighter who seemed unbeatable. But as the two battled it out, they were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Green Arrow and Black Canary. As the heroes tried to make their escape, Atomic Skull and a group of other villains, including Evil Star, Gork, Electrocutioner, Bloodsport, and Tracer, gave chase, but their efforts were in vain as Green Arrow quickly caught them in his net arrow. With the Meta Brawl shut down, Atomic Skull found himself joining forces with Grodd's Legion of Doom. With the help of Lex Luthor, his powers were further augmented, and he was sent on a dangerous mission to steal the heart of Nanda Parbat. But things took a turn when he was possessed by the ghostly entity known as Deadman during an assault on Gorilla City. Freed by Tala, he found himself once again teaming up with the Legion as they modified their headquarters into a spaceship. As the Legion prepared for the return of Brainiac, they were instead confronted with the resurrection of the powerful Darkseid. Atomic Skull and the other villains found themselves reluctantly teaming up with the Justice League to save the world from destruction. Despite his initial protests, Atomic Skull proved to be a valuable ally in the fight against Darkseid, helping to stop an army of parademons in Washington, D.C. When Luthor ultimately defeated the powerful villain, Skull and his fellow villains were given a 5-minute head start before they would once again face incarceration for their past crimes. In this tale of heroism and redemption, Atomic Skull proved that even the most notorious of criminals can find redemption when the fate of the world is at stake. Number 7. How powerful is he? As Albert Michaels, Atomic Skull is a skilled leader and a brilliant scientist who wears a mask that enables him to unleash powerful energy bolts. Over the years, these blasts have been described as various forms of energy, such as unique brain waves, heat fission, and radioactive energy. However, he fails to control these bioelectric outbursts. Having said that, these beams are strong enough to incapacitate Superman himself, and we know the kind of things Superman can do. On the other hand, Joseph Martin possesses incredible levels of strength, stamina, and durability. His abilities are on par with those of Superboy, Superman, and Largan. Furthermore, he has the capability to project blasts of purple atomic energy from his hands or mouth to attack from a distance. He can also use this energy to amplify his powers. Overall, Atomic Skull possesses the power of nuclear radiation. He can emit powerful blasts of radiation from his eyes and hands, which can cause severe damage to his surroundings and opponents. He also has superhuman strength, the ability to absorb various types of energy, and can fly at supersonic speeds. Additionally, he is highly resistant to physical harm and can create solid energy constructs, including shields and weapons. Furthermore, he has shown the capacity to control other people's minds using his radiation powers, making him a formidable adversary for most superheroes. And if by chance he explodes, he can take down several blocks along with him, as if the place is subjected to a small nuclear explosion. Marvelous verdict. Say what you will about this guy, but the fury that boils within Atomic Skull is frightening. His resentment towards Superman burns like a white-hot flame, blaming the hero for his suffering. Atomic Skull's journey is a tragic one, and the raw emotion that fuels him is both captivating and unsettling. There is definitely potential for a compelling live-action film centered around Atomic Skull. His tragic backstory, intense emotional struggles, and powerful abilities make for a captivating character study with the potential for explosive action sequences. However, the success of such a film would depend on how well it is executed, and with DC's current track record, they should be exceedingly careful to avoid falling into the trap of creating a one-dimensional villain. Instead, they should explore the complex motivations that drive Atomic Skull's actions, which would make for a much more nuanced and interesting character. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone!